Hello, my name is Dante Renee, and welcome to the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more. Like tonight's film, this is 1971's The American Dreamer. This is 1971's The American Dreamer, put out by Vinegar Syndrome's sister company, Etiquette Pictures. And yes, right behind me here is a Vinegar Syndrome distributed release, Sensual Encounters of Every Kind, which you can find video on this YouTube page, and there's Lost Empire, and there's Spookies, and yes, those are all videos you can find on this YouTube page. But for tonight, 1971, we are looking at The American Dreamer, and yes, that is Dennis Hopper, right there, in this unbelievable documentary snapshot 1971, not just 1971, but Dennis Hopper, a person, a human being, 1971. That's actually the reversible cover, the alternate cover. Etiquette Pictures has, I believe, 4 releases. This will now be the 3rd one, which I've looked at on this YouTube page. There is a booklet on the inside. DVD, Blu-ray, special features. I mean, Etiquette Pictures is really kind of like the Criterion of Vinegar Syndrome in many, many regards, although all of Vinegar Syndrome really seems to be like a criterion of the lost films. This movie right here from 1971, you might... you know what documentaries are. You've seen documentaries. You've seen films from the 70s. This truly is an 81 minutes. This is truly an 81-minute journey into 1971, and as I stated, into Dennis Hopper 1971. This is a powerfully unreal experience. I was absolutely blown away by this movie, and the fact that nobody knows about it, the fact that the negative was lost in a fire, the fact that it was pretty much a lost film, screened on some college campuses supposedly, way back in the day. Nobody's talking about this movie. I don't even recall Dennis Hopper talking about this movie in his latter career. This is right after Dennis Hopper made Easy Rider, and you are in his life, in his circles, in his home, out in the field, in the editing room, as he's editing his next film, with his friends, with his lovers, with his family, with his guns, with his women, his weed, his naked body and others' naked bodies, with his mind, with his art, photography, with his demons and his angels and which are which, with his philosophy, with his theology, and with his philosophy of art and film. And yes, you'll hear stories about Dennis Hopper's interaction and friendship with such characters as Charles Manson, and you can see ties to Andy Warhol. You will hear things in this film. You will experience things in this film as Dennis Hopper talks about film, talks about the camera that is filming him in this documentary, talks about the differences between cinema, moving pictures, and photography, still pictures. This film goes well beyond breaking the fourth wall. Okay? In many regards, this might be the ultimate documentary that I've ever seen. Never heard a deconstruction of what we are watching, of what is happening the way it is happening in The American Dreamer. Dennis Hopper is deconstructing what we are watching, how it is being filmed, what is reality, what is acting, what is editing. The camera, its similarities to a gun, to a weapon. You will hear Dennis Hopper talk about his collection of art and how he doesn't collect art for the sake of having it himself, but for the sake of a place, a safe haven to protect those pieces of art, to preserve those pieces of art. And you know what's interesting? Isn't that exactly what this distributor of this film is doing? Vinegar Syndrome, Etiquette Pictures. Isn't that exactly what they're doing? There is a world in this film. It's a world that as you're watching this film, you will think to yourself, I've never seen anything more real than this before. Beyond the fourth wall, more real than real, turning in on itself and deconstructing everything about everything. Dennis Hopper exposing himself both emotionally, spiritually, and also physically. You will hear themes about individualism, about I, about intimacy, about sex and women and fantasies. You will hear about loneliness and about romance with your pillow. You will hear things that might make you feel comfortable and also uncomfortable. You will hear the dichotomy of black and white, good and evil, but also how those lines are terribly blurred. When I said you'd feel comfortable and uncomfortable, I said that because I feel like because of Dennis Hopper's openness, because of the American Dreamer's openness, you might not feel as lonely as Dennis Hopper is in The American Dreamer. How do you talk about The American Dreamer without talking about the cinematography, the editing, and the style, overall style of this movie? First off, I will say the music in this movie pulsates. There's music throughout most of the film. And the music follows almost interlude-like periods and times in the film, where when the music plays, it's really the sole focus. There's nothing else, happening. And all of a sudden, you will go to almost still-like images of the background, the nature, the desert, outside, and the music will play. Almost in a contemplative type of way of what you have seen already in The American Dreamer. And now we're taking a reprieve with the music as the lyrics of the music and as the very, very simple, subtle, almost photography-like imagery cascades over the screen. The music is very 70s acoustic guitar, almost folk, a little bit of country, a bit of it feels of Richie Havens a bit, who was in Catch My Soul, which is also an Etiquette Pictures distributed movie that I looked at on this YouTube page. Just real strong 70s hippie, introspective, philosophical, free love, drugs, love, sex, freedom, revolution. Revolution is a theme. Evolution is a theme. And supposedly in the credits of the film, which are only in the beginning of the movie, it says that there's a soundtrack for this movie out there, which of course I'm going to be looking for. But if it's any indication, I did not recognize the label of the soundtrack that it was released on, but also if there's any indication on how absolutely rare this film is, how rare could that soundtrack be? Oh my gosh. Wow. This is a film that uses freezing on imagery that was once in motion. How interesting that one of the themes of the film is photography and motion picture as well. How interesting that the film itself, The American Dreamer itself, also plays that stylistically with what is a motion image and then right into that freezing right before our very eyes. Dennis Hopper is narrating this film both live in front of us and also behind us. You hear his voice over imagery. And then you cut to the time when it was actually spoken live by him. You know, I want to mention also that some of the music in this film is done live, also in a room, in a sweaty hot room. A group of people, Dennis Hopper wailing away as someone near him is rolling a doobie. And there's that scene where he's kind of letting these belts of screams or chants or knowing the words of a song that is being played in the room amidst these bearded people. And it's so uninhibited. That one piece right there might make you uncomfortable on how uninhibited it is. That maybe in his yelps, his singing to a song in that scene, we're seeing more of how open he really is in The American Dreamer. The editing is jarring. It's oppressively, beautifully 70s, if that makes any sense to you whatsoever. Cutting in ways that are not in the mainstream with cinema, cutting in ways that are not Hollywood, that are not normal, cutting things out of order. Some moving in a pace that is not normal. Almost cuts that are almost flashing across the screen. They're so fast sometimes. But not like a strobe, but quick and jarring. There's a timeless quality to this movie. That's not a chronological quality. There's a timeless quality to it because things aren't really existing in time per se, in the edit, in the way that it is made, and in the way that it begins, and in the way that it ends. Or does it ever really end? Scenes are returned to, or environments or sections are returned to, split up throughout the life of the American Dreamer. You might get a piece of Dennis Hopper when he was in that particular room, and then you might go back to that room 45 minutes later. You might hear him speaking from that room, though, in other scenes as well, and then go back to him, and you'll be continuing the part of the conversation live. It's like Dennis Hopper in here is aware of the camera, which is a theme in this film, and then at other times he seems to live not knowing it. There is a section of the film where other people in the room in front of the camera are asked, is the camera altering reality? Or by turning the lights off in the room, is that altering reality? What you know, something along those lines. What's affecting you more? And this is always a theme that people have talked about before. Can the camera at all, unless it's hidden, really capture reality? The American Dreamer deals with that as well. Dennis Hopper's dirty, sweaty, long, untrimmed, unkept 70s revolutionary beard, his incessant smoking, his confessions, his love of women and of sex unabashedly, not caring whether it offends you or if it delights you. It's both, they're both, as he says, terrific. And in this film, you will watch him live out one of his fantasies, and then one of his sexual fantasies. And then he will then show the limitations of, or not the limitations, but the differences between having a fantasy and then making a fantasy reality, and what each of those different experiences is like. This film has full nudity. You don't see Dennis Hopper's penis, but you see his ass, even stripping in a neighborhood, smoking pot, shooting guns, even semi-automatic, I believe, at a cross. There are crosses in this film, outside, mentioned. A large crucifix next to Andy Warhol art in his abode, which also has a very bizarre robotic contraption moving up and down, up and down. It almost looks like a pinball, a piece of a large pinball machine. You will see a bathtub orgy with him and two girls, full nudity from the women, and even some discussions with actual playmates of the time. And Hugh Hefner, not Hugh Hefner, and Hugh's not in the film, but mentions about Playboy and just that snapshot of an era of when Playboy started to photograph women's pubic hair also, and how much Dennis Hopper treasured that and loved that. And you will, you know, orgies and real people. Where are these people now? Where are these girls now? Awesome, attractive, wild, real, the real deal 70s girls in this movie. They're sexually attractive, they're mysterious, they're mystical, and they're completely smitten by Dennis Hopper's in this film. I was going to say Dennis Hopper's character, or Dennis Hopper as a person, or as the character, as an actor, as a or as a traveler, as a journeyman, as a shooter. A man who values protecting himself. He's a dangerous man. This is a dangerous film. A real true definition. Documentary danger. Documentary danger. Wow. This is 1971's The American Dreamer. 81 minutes of documentary danger, just like the cover shows it to be. Thank you so much for watching the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page, where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more, like 1971's The American Dreamer. Thank you so much, and good night.